G'day everybody, Matt Ellis with you for the latest edition of the Cricket Library podcast. And today we chat to a man who entertained us on the field in the 90s.
Chee Quee's been tremendously consistent during this Mercantile Mutual Cup. This is his fourth half century, 6 runs short of his first 100.
That could go for 4. There's a man inside the circle at fine leg, so he moves to 98. The perfect leg glance, just helped it on its way. Moody straying onto leg stump. This time he should get it. It's into the gap. If he runs hard, he'll bring up the 100 for Richard Chee Quee. That's a tremendous knock. He punches the air, and rightly so. Richard Chee Quee getting a magnificent ovation.
Richard Chee Quee. Not only did he entertain us on the field, he and his mates have been entertaining many with their band 6 and Out. Richard takes us on a journey from the days of playing cricket in the backyard with his brother, embracing his Chinese heritage, and inspiring the next generation on and off the field. It's time to sit back, relax, and enjoy the Richard Chee Quee story on the Cricket Library podcast. It's a very warm welcome to the Cricket Library podcast, Richard Chee Quee. Thanks so much for joining us.
Absolute pleasure, Matt. Great to be here, mate.
We love going back in time and telling stories on this podcast, and your career is a fairly unique one, and one that we'd love to hear more about. Can you take us back in time to your early recollections of developing a love of the game?
Oh, I think it's just like most cricketers, or just most Australians, really. It all started in the backyard. I was lucky enough to have an older brother, Michael, who's a very, very good cricketer himself. But you know, in the backyard, we just loved playing sport. And the beautiful thing about backyard cricket, you just created your own rules. So you know, it wasn't unusual for us to have a taped up tennis ball, and a wet pitch, and a bucket of water at the bowler's end. At the end of his run, the long run, and he would dip it into the bucket of water, and you just see this comet coming towards you with a tail of spray coming from the ball, and just late swing, and it was just things like that were just backyard cricket for me was where I fell in love with the game, but certainly World Series cricket. Just watching that on TV was unbelievable. Just made me love it, and watching the West Indies, because I just had a love of watching the West Indies play. I just gravitated towards them more than I guess the Australians, because the West Indies were different and I was different. And in the backyard, unfortunately, my brother was always Australia or England, and I was always the West Indies. So in the backyard is where it all began, mate.
And how do you go from those backyard encounters with Michael? When's your first taste of organised cricket? Well,
I had to wait because cricket actually started in the under-10s, proper cricket.
Yep.
Where we wore, whites and you played pretty much from 9 till 12. But it was proper cricket, because it was sometimes it was over 2 weekends. So, and I was 7.5 when my brother said to me that he was in the under-10s, and I said, because he was a couple of years older, and he said his team needed somebody because they had somebody that couldn't play, and he said, well, what about my brother? And the coach said, because I used to go and watch him, and he said, yeah, would he like to play? Oh, would I ever? So I remember, turning up to my first game of cricket, and I was on the score sheet to bat at number 11, and I didn't bowl. So I stood in the field for 3 hours and watched, and I watched everyone else bat, didn't get a bat. and I was hooked. I loved it. Oh, and I look back and I was like, you absolute nincompoop. But honestly, because, in the backyard, I was my brother's equal. We were actually very equal in the backyard. But, I was always watching him play at a higher level. So when he was in the under-10s, I was watching. When he went into the under-12s, I started in the under-10s. So whenever I got a chance to watch him, I was always watching better cricket. But I always knew in the back of my mind and in my heart that I was my brother's equal. So when he was doing really well in the juniors, I'm thinking, man, I can do this. So, we both fell in love with cricket very, very early. But, I certainly attribute, any success that I had in cricket days, certainly to the way, I guess, we were brought up, and particularly with my brother. He was a shining light in my success. So I have to absolutely give him the plaudits that he deserves. So, my brother was certainly a major reason why I did well in cricket. But, yeah, under-12s, under-14s, and then, gosh, we were in the backyard and he said to me one day, I think you need to come down to grade cricket training. I said, okay, and I was 14 at the time, and he said, you're getting too big for your boots in the backyard here. It's time to come down and have a crack, and so I remember going down to grade cricket, my first training session, and that was for Randwick.
It must be great memories. I remember myself, I think I was similar age when I first went down to a senior grade cricket training, and you're wide-eyed, you're just looking at all these fantastic cricketers around you, and you start to feel that you belong in that group. Even though you're 14 years old, it really does provide that aspirational element to what you're doing. When did you kind of realise, I think this is something I'm actually going to have a chance to play at a high level? You play in some New South Wales junior representative teams. Is that kind of when you realised this is something that I can take to another level?
It's funny you say that because I was, once again, I was very lucky that I had a brother who, I don't think I would have felt like I belonged right at the very beginning, because I remember going down to my first training session thinking, everybody looks so old. I couldn't believe how old everybody looked. And, but I was lucky that my brother was there, and he had his first game at 5th grade as well when he was 14. So he'd been down there for a couple of years, and to see how he was accepted as a minority. We were the only Asian, kids playing cricket at the club. Right, and there was a few other, ethnic kids or ethnic players, but mainly, Anglo-Australian players. But to see how Michael was treated and looked after, gave me confidence to be myself. And I remember my first training session, and I put my name down to the practice captain, and he called my name out early. And normally you have to wait. And I looked at the nets, and there was 2 turf nets. There was 2 turf nets going, and the first turf net was the 1st and 2nd graders. The second turf net was the 3rd and 4th graders, and then the 5th and 6th net were the 2 synthetic wickets, and that was for the 5th grade and what would you call maybe the Metro squad or the train-on squad. So there was 6 nets going at once. And my eyes were just looking at the first net, which was the 1st and 2nd grade net. And I was looking, and there was David Knox, who was a very, very good cricketer as well, as a rugby legend, that played, for Australia and also for Randwick. Mike Whitney was steaming in as well. And I'm thinking, my God, I've only seen him on TV. And, there was, the other opening bowler was Wayne Heathcote. We had Trevor Jay, who was a left-arm orthodox, bowling his spinners, and I'm thinking, well, he'd taken over 1,000 wickets, and I'm looking at these just mesmerised, and they were running, and it was serious heat and serious cricket. Anyway, my name got called out to put the pads on early, and so I got myself ready, and I looked up, and there was 4 batsmen ready to go in, and then first and second net, and then the 2 synthetics. So I walked over to the synthetics, and I looked up, and I was thinking, these 5th grade and metro bowlers, and I looked at it, and I thought, it doesn't seem so bad. I think I can handle this. Maybe I think I can handle this, And as they hit their last balls, the practice captain called out. He says, "Young man," he says, "wrong net, mate. You're in this one." And he pointed to the 1st and 2nd grade net.
Oh, wow.
And Matt, you've just, like, I don't know how to describe it. It was my stomach, the adrenaline, it was everything happened really quickly from then, because I just didn't have time to really absorb what was happening. Because so all of a sudden I'm walking into the 1st grade net, and the 1st grade bowlers, they normally rotate. Who's the first bowler? Who's the second? And I remember Mike Whitney bowled the last ball, so I think it was Trevor Jay's first turn to bowl, and he was a left arm orthodox. So I was like, and you got to remember, I'm 14 years old and I don't have a helmet. I didn't own a helmet. No one can get the ball above waist side in the under 14. So I'm walking in there, and I've taken guard, and I hear Mike Whitney for the first time say, "Hammer, relax, mate," to Trevor Jay. "I'll take the first one," at this young punk, and I'm thinking, oh my God. And he's running, and as I said, I've only seen him in the commercial when he's batting against the West Indies. The 2 he's at. And he comes running in, and I'm thinking, concentrate, watch the ball. And as he's about to bowl, I thought, you're not concentrating, walk away. So I backed away. I literally shit myself. So, and he kept running through, and he literally came straight up to me, and I had my head down. I couldn't even look at him. And he said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Sorry, Mr. Whitney, I just wasn't ready." He goes, "Righto." So he turned back and walked to his mark, and normally somebody else would bowl. And he said, "Everyone, I'm told you, I'm having the first ball at this young punk." And just then, it's like time stood still. The training stopped. Everybody stopped. And it was like silent. You could hear the pin drop. Even the outfielders who were practicing catching stopped. And Whit come off his long run, and I'm thinking, watch the ball. You're 14 years old. You haven't got a helmet. He won't bounce you. And I thought, just watch the ball, get on the front foot, and just get behind it. And he ran in, and he bowled this ball, and he bounced me. And it went over the off stump, and it just missed my nose, and it came off the back net, and it went halfway down the wicket. So as a polite batsman, I walked up to get the ball, and I'm shaking, and I picked the ball up and I gave it to him. And he looked at me and he said, "Welcome to Randwick."
Welcome to Randwick. and I got to say, in his defence, he never bounced me again, but he just wanted to let me know that coming into grade cricket without a helmet, there's going to be no mercy here, mate. And it was just like, yeah, I think I told my mum, we've got to go to Rebel and go and buy it. But it was but that's what it was like at grade cricket. It was incredible. It was incredible. That was my initiation to grade cricket, yeah. It's where the big boys play.
That's right.
Oh, that's outstanding. Now, you get the opportunity to go to the cricket academy. Does that happen before your first class debut or after?
No, that happened before. Yeah, no, that happened before. It was I was lucky enough to play in the I got selected to play in the under-19.
Yep.
For New South Wales, and unfortunately, I missed out in the under-17s when the state selections were done. I was actually quite disappointed. I think my club was more disappointed than me because I didn't really know much about it. And there was no real selection criteria in regards to tryouts. Like, I remember trying out with, having some training sessions with, combined New South Wales squads with, particularly through Green Shield and Moore Shield and Watson Shield. But when the under-17s were selected, I missed out, and I was the only player. I was 16, and I was the only one that was actually playing first grade, batting in first grade at the time. So it was something that I look back now and I think, well, as disappointing as it was, I suppose it was juniors, but then I got my opportunity and played a couple of years in the under-19s. And I think from that, the New South Wales, some of the New South Wales players that were in those squads got an opportunity to go to the Cricket Academy. And that was in 1991. So I was about 19, 20 years old at the time.
Down at Glenelg at the time, was it?
No, it wasn't at Glenelg.
Oh, Henley Beach?
Yeah, well, it wasn't at Henley Beach either. That was Rod Marsh's first year as head coach. And we had Richard Doan as the assistant coach, and Brian McFadden was the scholarship coach. But we were billeted, and most of us were actually living in pubs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we were all billeted. Some were staying in the university, some were staying at there was two pubs that they were housing. So myself, Adam Gilchrist and Kevin Roberts, we were all staying in the Seaton Hotel in Adelaide. And I think if there are any Adelaide people out there, the locals, they would know that the Seaton Hotel is not where you would probably want to house a couple of young fellas. We were warned very early by Norma and Sandy that they said, fellas, from Thursday through to Sunday, I suggest you don't go in the front bar. So we just stuck to the back bar and had our meals and just kept to ourselves. But it was 1991. That was when I got the opportunity to go to the Cricket Academy.
And later, you do get that chance to debut for New South Wales. You play a bit of cricket overseas before then. You head to Scotland, is that right?
No, I headed to England.
Yep.
And right. 1989 was my first year in England. And I was a late call-up. My brother, Andrew Milliken and Adam Harris, those guys were all going. They're all first-grade cricketers for Randwick, and they all got an opportunity to go and play cricket in England. And it was a last-minute thing that there was an opportunity for a fourth. And that's when my brother said to me, do you want to come to England? It's like, what? Are you kidding me? Of course I want to come to England. And that was our first year, but it was funny because we caught the train from London, to Liverpool, and with obviously 1989 back then there was no phones, there was no computers, they were just expecting four cricketers from the Randwick Cricket Club. So Spike thinks, well, they're not going to know who we are, so we're not going to know who we're looking for. So he grabbed his Randwick jumper at Lime Street Station and stood in the middle of the station and said, Randwick cricketers. And this Scouser hobbles over, and my brother and I at the time had never seen a policeman with hats before, and we're taking photos like, good Asian tourists, good Australian tourists. And this Scouser hobbles over and says to Spike and says, "Are you the cricketers, Lake?" And Spike says, "Yeah, mate. G'day, I'm Andrew Milliken from Australia. This is Adam Harris, and those two blokes over there taking photos, mate. That's Michael and Richard Chee Quee." He said, "Where are they?" And that's when I sort of came out. I said, "G'day, mate, Richard Chee Quee." And he goes, "Oh, fucking hell, you look like him, or you sound like him." He says, "At least you bloody sound like him." And I thought, "Nice to meet you, mate." So that was our introduction. As they were expecting 4 Australian cricketers, and then my brother and I were the other 2. So they made us actually go and train before they picked us in the first team, and we didn't know what the standard was like. So we actually had to train for it. So fortunately, after the training session, they come up and said, "Right, mate, where do you want to bat and where do you want to bowl?" So it was a tough initiation, but they at the end of the season, they absolutely wanted us back. Between my brother and himself, we broke all the records, and it was just an amazing start for our journey overseas, because I ended up having 6 seasons in England and 2 in Scotland. Yeah, so I had 8 seasons.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
And how did you find the conditions? Did playing in England help you develop your all-round game in terms of playing in different conditions?
Absolutely. I mean, I encourage any cricketer of any years, no matter how old you are, no matter how good you are, you actually learn, more about life as well. You learn a lot about yourself. The conditions over there are completely different to the conditions back in Australia. But then again, we didn't care. We didn't care what the conditions were, because we were playing cricket, and we just loved the game. So to be able to play cricket 12 months of the year was, it was never a chore. It was just such and to get paid a little bit to do that was amazing. So, but yeah, the conditions were so different. I mean, the balls were different. Even the soil and the wicket was different. And bowlers challenge you. You were challenged in different ways. So there was a different pressure as well, particularly when you were the professional. And with that comes its responsibilities, not just on the field, but off the field. And I always say, wherever you go, whichever club you go to, work out what the culture is early and be part of it. If you be part of that culture, whatever the club's culture is, they'll accept you as one of them. And yes, of course, you're the novelty, being the professional. But if you give themselves, if you give yourself to them and be part of that culture, they accept you. It doesn't matter what you do on the field. Obviously, it helps if you do well, but but as I said, it comes with a different pressure, because it's in a lot of teams, the standard in a lot of teams are so varied across the park. You can have 1 or 2 decent first graders, you can have a few, third and fourth graders, and you can have some players that make up the numbers that probably wouldn't get a start in your 5th grade side at home. So, with that, and you try to work out, who you can help, who you can support, and they all play for different reasons. So, I'm so lucky to have met so many wonderful people, and still some of them I keep in contact with today.
Oh, fantastic. The cricket family is far-reaching to all parts. That's for sure. And you get off to a flying start in your first-class career. England A play against New South Wales at the SCG March 1993. What are your recollections about finding out you're going to be playing in that game and the game itself?
Well, I remember coming home from training, and there was a box on the table, and my brother and my mum and my sister were there, and they said, "You got a package in the mail." And I thought, "Oh, okay, cool." And I remember opening the box. I'm thinking, if this came in the mail, why isn't it secure, and why is it I can just open it? I said, "Who opened my mail?" And they said, "Don't worry, just open it." I said, "Okay." So I opened it, and in the box there was a note, and it said, "Congratulations, you're in the team." And I thought, what team? And because I had no idea if I was even close. And they said, "You're in the New South Wales team. You got selected." I went, "What?" And that's how I found out. It was a beautiful moment. I was, we celebrated that night, and it was against England A. And I remember that so fondly, because we turned up to the ground and we're warming up, and Phil Emery came up to me because I was listed to bat number 5, and I think it was Steve Small had just come back from being peppered at the Gabba. Rackerman and co. got him beautifully, and he was going to play that game, but he decided to pull out. which left an opportunity for someone to open the batting with Michael Slater. And Phil Emery came up to me and said, "Do you fancy opening the batting?" And I said, "Mate, absolutely, yeah, great, terrific, an opportunity to bat with Michael Slater." It was incredible. So, because I also played juniors with Slats, we played in the under-19s together, and I sort of got to watch him do amazing things even in the juniors. So yeah, I mean, there was Andy Caddick, Mark Eilert, Peter Such. It was a pretty good lineup from that the England team had, and I managed to get a few runs on in the first innings. I managed to get 90 in my first dig, but I also remembered I faced 231 balls for it.
Oh wow!
And it was I don't know, it was just one of those wickets where they just kept the ring up, and once I realised that they just weren't really trying to get me out, I thought, well, I'm just loving being out here. I'm just going to try and stay out here as long as I can. And I don't think I've ever batted 231 balls in my life before and not scored 100. So it was something that I guess I proved to myself even back then. But yeah, it was incredible. But the funny story with that match was we were only chasing 25 for victory in the second innings, and they opened the bowling with Peter Such and an old ball, and they decided to bowl with a 9-1 field. They had a silly mid-off and a mid-off, a mid-off and a silly mid-off on the offside with a slip, and they had nobody else on the offside. So no one from extra cover all the way around to backward point. Everybody was else on the leg side, and he came round the wicket and bowled into the rough. And I thought, I'm going to try and reverse sweep him. So I thought, we're only chasing 25 to win, right? And of course, I've played 1,000 reverse sweeps in the backyard with my brother. And I thought, this is the time to do it because they've got no one there. I can't score on the leg side. I was either going to pat him away. They had everyone around the bat, and I thought I'll reverse sweep him. So I tried to reverse sweep him, and I missed it. And went over the leg stump, and the keeper missed it. We got 3 leg byes. Well, we went on to, and one thing I couldn't believe about in the second innings was that they were sledging us, or they were sledging Michael Slater. He missed out in the first innings, and they were into him, and Slats wasn't backing down. And I was sitting back at the non-strikers then going, oh my God, I couldn't believe what they were saying to each other and the tone they were saying to each other. And the umpires just stood back and went, oh my God, as well. And I thought, is this what first-class cricket is all about? So we ended up, knocking them over. We got them none down. And I remember walking off the field, and Phil Emery, our captain, came running up to me, grabbed me, and said, "Cheeks, well done, well done." And I thought, well, mate, we're always going to win. We're only chasing 25. And he said, no, you got 10 not out. You're averaging 100. And I said, oh. And he said, if you retire now, you'd make a good quiz question. I thought, you fucker. He said, that's the good news, but the bad news is you're not better than Bradman. It's only going to get worse from here. And he was right. I should have retired. But I remember, just to finish on this game and this story, I remember going to training the following week, and Steve Rickson, our coach, came up to me and said, "Cheeks, congratulations on your first game. How'd you enjoy it?" And I said, "Oh, mate, I loved it, but I couldn't believe the sledging out there." He goes, "Yeah, I think it was more personal with Slats." And he said, "I heard you played a couple of reverse sweeps." And I said, "No, I only just tried to play the one." He said, "No, I heard you played a couple." I said, "No, honestly, Stump, I only just played the one, mate. But, they had a 9-2 field or whatever." And he said, "No, you played a couple. You're first and you're fucking last." And I was speechless. I looked at him and he said, "Save that shit for the short version. You play first-class cricket, bat properly, mate." And I went, "Okay, then." All right. Okay, all right, that's right. Okay, fair enough. Yep, and that's how it was back then.
And it was a great period for New South Wales. That back-to-back 93, 94 Shield, Mercantile Mutual Cup double, that very rarely happened. You're part of the squad the year before. I think were you 12th man in the season before when we won the Shield 92-3 as well.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was 12th man for that game. But the beautiful thing was they just made me feel like I was a part of it. It was great. I can't really claim that one because I wasn't actually in the team, but they made me feel like I was, and it was great. But just to sit back and watch Slater, Taylor, War, Bevan just go about their business. I mean, I knew I was not going to get an opportunity. But the following year in 93, 94, we did get an opportunity because those blokes weren't available for the final. And I was considered a part of the squad that was really the baby blues because, when Australian cricket was strong, New South Wales cricket was stronger because we really had a good representation in that era. As I said, we had Taylor, Slater, War, Bevan. That was the top five. So realistically, when they were available for New South Wales, the rest of the state in New South Wales in grade cricket, we're all trialling out for the number 6 spot. And most of the time they would pick an all-rounder because, let's be honest, you didn't need an extra batsman if you had those 5 in front of you.
Yeah.
There was only 2 times that I actually got selected when they were available, and that was something that I was really proud of, that they actually picked me. And I was, ironically, both times, Mark Taylor was captain once and Steve Waugh was captain the other game, and they both came up to me in the dressing room before the match and said, the batting order, Cheeks? And I said, yeah, no prizes for guessing. Yeah, they said, yeah, 6. So I knew my place. But yeah, that 93-94 season was epic for so many reasons because there was a match against WA in Perth where we were absolutely annihilated. We won the toss and sent them in. And I'll never forget it because, it was a green top and we sent them in and they managed to get about 7 for 460 declared at drinks in the first session on day 2. And,
Oh, yeah. I've got it here. 8 for 503.
Was it 8 for? There you go. It was even worse. Justin Langer scored a double 100. It was a really, really tough match. And I remember we were 4 for at lunch. So we lost 4 wickets in the hour before lunch on the second day, on day 2. And I was opening the batting. I was not out. And first over after lunch, I nicked off, and it was Big Tom Moody that got me. And I remember walking off, and he gave me a nice little send off too. And I thought, oh, mate, we're down and out here. I probably didn't deserve that. And I remember, and then we got knocked over before tea, and the umpires came in our dressing room and said, "You've got 3 overs." They've enforced the follow-on. You've got 3 overs to face before tea. And I thought, oh, all right, let's go back out. So Rodney Davison and I walked back out, and we just had a team meeting saying how badly we batted. We got knocked over for 75. It's time to bat for 2.5 days and give them nothing. Come on, let's do it. So we're all psyched up, walking out, and Rodney came up to me and said, "Cheeks, do you mind taking the first ball again?" I said, "Mate, Rodney, it's your turn, mate." And he said, "Yeah, but he got a golden duck in the first innings, right?"
Yeah.
And I thought, "Oh, all right, I'll do it, mate. I'll take one for you." And Joe Angel came and just bowled this ball, it pitched leg, clipped off, and before the guys even got to the viewing room, we were 1 down, and I thought, "Oh no, here we go again." But unfortunately, the moral of the story is, I was the first player ever to get. I still hold the record. I think I was the first player ever to get out twice in a session.
Oh.
So, I was. So, unfortunately, I think I still hold that record in Australia. I believe a West Indian cricketer took the mantle off me a few years ago in Test cricket, but in first-class cricket, unfortunately, it still holds.
Oh.
So, but I remember. I know it's a little bit of a long story, but I'm going to complete it because it's pretty important. It's one of the reasons why I look back and think, what am I most proud of? And after that, we came home. Half of us had to come home that night, and the manager couldn't get us all on the same plane, so half of us had to come on the next morning. We caught the midnight horror back from Perth.
Yep.
I remember getting off the plane, and it was Saturday morning, and I remember looking at the Telegraph, and on the back page it had a big tombstone, and it had the headline was Blue Shame, and it had Rest in Peace, and it had all of our photos and our scores underneath each photo. So for myself, I had 17 and 0. There were guys that had 0 and 0. And Gavin Robertson's grandmother thought the plane had gone down.
Oh, right? No.
It was brutal. And I got the paper and thought, oh, my God. And inside the back page was the full story of how, we were just absolutely ridiculed by the Telegraph. And I remember everybody writing in saying, there was a lot of people of support, but we were embarrassed. And I remember Steve Rickson holding a training session for just the team that was there in Perth. And he said, right, North Sydney Oval, number 2, don't bring your gear, just your trainers. I thought, oh my God, we're just going to get a very big fitness session here as something to do after you get beaten in 2 days in Perth. So we got there, and he said, right, time for an honesty session, and it's only going to come from you guys. What you talk about it amongst yourselves about, what you did to prepare, what you could have done differently, and what we're going to do in the next game, because we're playing against Western Australia in 2 weeks' time at the SCG, and the Australian players aren't going to be available. So it's this squad here. What are you going to do? And we sat down for the next hour and a half, and we just opened up to each other and told a few home truths, and we got it all out of our system. I remember Michael Bevan standing up and said, well, I'm going to score 100. And we all looked at Bevo and said, well, that's good for you, mate. You're pretty talented, mate. And we played against Perth in Sydney, Western Australia in Sydney, 2 weeks' time. It was pretty much the same team. Well, Bevan scored a double 100, and we knocked over Western Australia within 2 days in Sydney. We then went on to host the final in Sydney, and we won it. And we also won the Mercantile Mutual as well. So I look back and I think, my God, that was just, you talk about going from the absolute despair of, gosh, we can't even walk in the streets with our heads up because we've just been absolutely ridiculed, to then turning it around and somehow, and if it wasn't for that training session by Steve Rickson, it wouldn't have happened, because he sort of read the room beautifully and just thought, it's up to you guys. Only you guys. No one else is going to be able to do this. But you need to work out if you partied too hard, if you didn't, train hard enough, if you weren't prepared well, could some of those things been avoided? And the answer was yes, absolutely. So we turned it around. So I look back on that and think, what an amazing time.
Yeah, incredible time and incredible leadership from Steve Rickson. As you say, reading the room and just knowing exactly what you guys needed to get you back on track. And the results speak for themselves. I do want to get to the 131 in the Merc Cup final, but before we do that, I need to ask you about your prowess as a death bowler. This is when you said you only played with Taylor and Moore once each, and Taylor was smart enough to see something in you as a bowler. This is the only time you get a bowl in one-day domestic cricket. I think just looking through the stats, you took a few wickets for Randy Peets over the years, but this is on the big stage. Mercantile Mutual Cup, Tasmania, I think they must have needed about 50 runs to win. And who does Mark Taylor go to? He goes to his go-to man. Talk us through that over.
Oh my God, yeah, he did. It was a full house at North Sydney Oval. It was a great crowd, and that was one of the games where, they're all available, and I'm looking at the scoreboard, thinking there's no chance I'm going to get a bat today. We've got Slater, Taylor, War. It was just, and I think, and then funny how things happen, right? You get an opportunity to bat, and I managed to score a 50, and then I took a couple of catches, and I was sort of in the thick of it. I was involved in the run out as well. I was in the thick of it all game, and Tubby came up to me in the 49th over and said, "Cheeks, you want to take the last over? It's your day, mate." And I said, "Oh, mate, I'd love to, thanks." He says, "Mate, don't worry. I've done the calculations. We need more than 36 to win. So no wides, no balls, and you're sweet." And I said, "Cool." And Divenuto was batting with somebody else. I can't remember who, but and I remember he just sort of patted back the first couple of balls, and I thought, I am that bad a bowler. He just does not want to get out to me. And I think, and about the fourth ball, he played and missed, and Phil Emery went up for the big appeal, and I didn't. So I didn't appeal, and obviously the umpire gave not out. And at the end of the over, he said, "Why didn't you appeal?" And I said, "I didn't think he hit it." And he said, "Mate, he smashed it." I said, "Well, that's probably why I'm not a good bowler." But none for three off one on the 50th over. And I think I probably attribute that more that Dever didn't want to actually get out to me as opposed to trying to smash me all around the ground.
I love it. I love it that Tubby had faith in you not to bowl a wide or a no ball there, just to keep it.
That was the same game though. That bloody Wayne Holdsworth cracker. He came out and he made us batsmen look so bad. He came out. I think he scored 49 off 19 balls or something like that. He was on target to get the fastest 50, and he was going to smash it by about a dozen balls or something like that. And and it was funny because I remember being in the dressing room, and I think it was Mark Waugh said, "Boys, everyone just stay quiet, don't say a word." And we thought, okay. So he walks in, and we're all just getting ourselves ready, and no one said anything. And the look on Cracker's face, he walks in, he's like looking around. And said, "Why is he?" And Cracker said, "I don't know what you blokes were hanging around for. That was pretty easy." And I think Mark Waugh said, "Well, mate, if you could bowl, you'd be a good all-rounder." That just broke everyone up, and it was good to put him in his place. But yeah, no, that was certainly Cracker had a day out that day.
Oh, definitely. Now, 131 in the Mercantile Mutual Cup Final set the tone of the game. It was back when 50 over cricket was the cricket. It was the, I guess what the kids of today watching the Big Bash and that sort of thing. For kids growing up in the 90s, this was the trophy that you wanted to win. 131. There was a chance. You did give a chance in that. It wasn't chanceless, but talk us through what it meant to you to stamp your authority on the big stage in the final there.
Yeah, look, that was amazing. It was an amazing moment for me. It was amazing that I got an opportunity to play a role in a final and winning some silverware for New South Wales. So, it was an incredible match. When we were batting, I remember my mate Marty Hayward got run out at the non-strikers end because I smacked one back, and I think Mark Atkinson put his hand down and it went back onto the stumps, and he was just out, and I was gutted, gutted for him. But then Bevo and I, we put on a huge partnership. I couldn't walk for 3 days after because Bevo made me run most of it. But yeah, I just remember, it was just, and it was against Western Australia as well, and it was just like we had some really tough matches against WA. And and a few of them let me know that they didn't like me very much. So it was a really sweet moment for myself personally. So it was great. It was terrific. It was, I don't know. The only way I can really remember it is when I see some old footage of it. It's one of those things when you're in the zone, you don't really think too much. It flows and it just happens. So it was a very, very special moment for me, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and another special one comes a few years later in the first class arena in Newcastle. Not noted these days. Not a lot of cricket played there these days at the first class level, but over 16,500 fans attended this game over the duration. The West Indies, as you mentioned, growing up, you idolised a lot of these guys. Well, what's it like for you? You're out there, and you're facing up to Ambrose, Walsh, Bishop. It must have been a bit surreal.
It was. It was more than just a game for me. I remember I'd been dropped from the New South Wales team, and I scored heavily in grade cricket to get myself back in. And I got my opportunity to play, through playing the West Indies. And ironically, the best success I had was against the international teams, not against our own. It was quite interesting. I look back and I think, geez, that's weird. It was more than just a game for me. It was very emotional on so many levels, because having been the West Indies in my backyard, and the reason that I fell in love with the game was, as I said, through World Series cricket and watching the West Indies and admiring the way they played. Here I am playing against the West Indies myself, and at that time, Ambrose and Walsh in '95, they're at their peak, and Bishop as well. So I looked at it and I think, oh my God, here's an opportunity to play against the team that I grew up loving and idolising. And I remember sitting at lunch, and because it was at Newcastle, it was a communal lunchroom, and I was sitting down, and then Ambrose came and sort of sat near me at lunch, and I'm sort of eating away, and I said, I sort of looked at him and said, I'm like, how is it out there? He says, you didn't really say much. He just was like, cool, man. And that was it. He'd done, he was one of those West Indies that just kept it. It didn't say much at all. Didn't say anything. Gave nothing. And but I remember the night before, when I knew we were batting, and I think I was batting at 5, and we were 1 down overnight, and I was rooming. I can't remember who I was rooming with, but I couldn't sleep the night before. I was just too wired up about playing, knowing that I was going out there to face, the likes of Ambrose and Walsh and Bishop and the West Indies. Oh my God. And so I went down into the foyer, and they had a piano there. And I asked the concierge there, this was at about 1 o'clock in the morning. And I said, mate, do you mind if I just play a couple of tunes? He said to me, can you play? And I said, I can play a little bit. He said, yeah, try not to play too loud. And I said, cool. And I only know 5 tunes on the piano, self-taught, just 5 tunes. And I must have played those same 5 tunes for 4 hours.
Wow.
And I just stayed there, and I just played, and I mucked around, and he didn't mind. Because he knew I was part of the state team. And anyway, I went back up at about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was looking at the walls. I didn't sleep, went down for breakfast, and went out, and I was just absolutely, once again, can't remember any of it, actually being out in the middle. But to then, to score 100 against those guys was just, as I said, it was emotional. It was something that I look back on and I think, oh my God, that is just one of the biggest highlights for me as personally, because of, I guess, my affiliation with the West Indies on how I grew up and how I loved the game. So it was more than just a match for me. It was more than just 100. It was everything. And then that gave me an opportunity to play more cricket for New South Wales. Yeah.
A wonderful turn of events, I guess, to be there and to be able to get the best out of yourself on not a lot of sleep. Normally these stories are guys out maybe having a few quiet cordials till 5 o'clock in the morning. Richard Chee Quee, he just gets on the piano.
Oh, at the end of the match, I made up for it. Those jugs of illusion in Newcastle, let me tell you, they do look like corny, but yeah, they certainly don't taste like it. But it was funny. One of the funny stories that came out of that match was David Freeman, the youngster.
Yeah.
He took 10 wickets for the match, and I scored 105. And I think the headline in the papers were, "Two Chinamen destroy the Windies."
Oh, dear.
You talk about political correctness. I mean, I look back at it now and think, oh, you buggers, I've got to take you to the cleaners. But it was, I never looked at, whenever I saw a headline that brought out my heritage, and it still happens today, Richard Chee Quee, the first or second player of Chinese origin to play first class. It's not something that I think negatively on, because it's part of my heritage, and I've been asked many times, how do you feel? And well, I feel no different to any other Australian because first and foremost, I'm Australian. But my heritage, absolutely proud, very, very proud. But once again, as I said, it sort of comes with its responsibilities as well.
Yeah, and speaking of those responsibilities, you get the opportunity to engage with school children, with Todd Greenberg, who a lot of people would be familiar with what he's doing now, but back in the 90s there, he was a development officer at Cricket New South Wales, and you and he have strong links. Tell us a little bit about what you and Todd got up to.
That's right, yeah. Well, Todd and I, we grew up playing cricket together. We played in the juniors together. We played at all of our grade cricket together. Our families knew each other. So it was, he was a great mate then, and he's still a great mate now. We still catch up regularly, and, we've got some old cricketing buddies that played in the 80s and 90s for Randwick Cricket, including himself, and we still get together once a year and catch up and go and play some golf and tell the same stories and the old yarns, and it's just wonderful. But back in those days when he was the development officer for New South Wales, he had this vision which blew me away because I was completely oblivious to it. And he said, "Cheeks, I've got an idea. I want you to come with me. I'm going to pick you up. We're going to do some coaching." And at that time, as a player, you get an opportunity to do some coaching because back then we weren't getting paid. There was no what do you call it? We weren't getting paid. There was no what's the
contracts?
Word? Sorry, contracts. There was no contracts back then. There was no players' union. It was just you only get paid when you played. So we got an opportunity through the development officers to do some coaching whenever we could. And he said, "I'll pick you up." And I said, "Where we go?" He said, "Don't worry, I'll tell you when we're on the way." So, he picked me up and we drove out west and we ended up towards Liverpool. And we went to half a dozen schools throughout the day in Liverpool, Canley Vale, Cabramatta, all those sorts of areas where it's very Asian, but also non-English speaking backgrounds. And, and about the second or the third school, he said, "I just want you to know that I'm not targeting the children. I'm not targeting these children that we're coaching." And I said, "What do you mean? So why are we out here? Why are we coaching if we're not targeting them?" He said, "Because their parents don't understand cricket, and their parents who've come over to Australia, they don't understand the culture of cricket. They're more interested in their academics. So to get them to give up their Saturdays and it's going to be too hard. We might get one or two, but it's going to be too hard." And I said, "Well, who are we targeting then?" He said, "We're targeting their kids, the next generation. Because if they enjoy playing a game of cricket and learning about the culture through us and through you and your face, then when it's time for their kids to get an opportunity to play cricket, they will say yes." And I look back and I think, wow.
What a visionary.
It was incredible. And I think right from that moment, I realized, man, you've got an opportunity here. Cheeks, you've got an opportunity here to do something, to give back, to help, to be the face, to do something. Because one of my favourite sessions that we did was the rainbow class, and the rainbow class was the kids that couldn't speak any English, but they tried everything that I did. I spoke pidgin English to them. They obviously there was a translator, but they didn't even have to translate. They understood by my actions, and they tried, and they had the best fun, and it was so rewarding. So to be pulled aside occasionally, still today, of adults who come up to me and so say, there's somebody actually at my school now with my kids. My kids are 6 and 9, and they go to the same primary school here at Orange Grove. And one of the parents came up to me and said, I remember you come to my school in Canley Vale, and you came out and spoke to us. And I remember that, and it's like, wow. And now their kids are actually playing cricket.
How good.
Very proud. So that's something that Todd had the vision so early. So to see Todd continue to do what he's done with his steps that he's taken and where he is today, well, I couldn't be more proud of him, honestly. I know he's proud of me, but honestly, I couldn't be more proud of him. And it's not a surprise for me to see Todd do what he's done in his career so far.
Yeah, wonderful stuff. And seeing things come to fruition must be very satisfying for both of you to see that the way things have gone since then. Now, sledges on cricket fields, often it's the bowlers doing the sledging, but what are the great stories? You're playing a grade game, you're getting a bit of lip from a spinner. Can you run us through one of the great cricket sledge stories that involves you batting?
Well, it was one in particular. Yeah, it was a left arm orthodox. I'm having a mental blank now, but Troy Crosland. It was Troy Crosland, and I'm going to tell this story, but with the utmost respect for Troy, because he's only recently passed away.
Yeah.
And it all happened very, very quickly. And it's ironic. It's funny in the cricket community, you don't have to be close to somebody that you played against. I played against Troy in all my juniors, and we played a lot of grade cricket against each other. And him being a left arm orthodox and me being a batsman, we had some wonderful batters. He got me a couple of times, and I got him a couple of times. And as I said, I'm more than happy to tell this story with the utmost respect for Troy. But this day, I was getting a hold of him, and he didn't like it. And he looked at me and he said, "Cheeks, you're nothing but a big fat sumo." And because he knew I didn't like to run, and I stood there, I thought to myself, "Well, you're half right." And then he bowled me a ball, and I thought, bugger, and I launched him, all right? And I launched him, and the ball half volleyed the McDonald's front door, right? And the ball ended up at McDonald's. And I walked down the pitch, because the game stopped because I had to go and fetch the ball, and I walked all the way up to the non-striker's end, pretending to go to my batsman. And I just looked up, I said, "Troy," I said, "While you're there, mate, can you get me a quarter pounder meal and upgrade it for me, mate, because I'm getting pretty hungry out here."
Make it a large, thanks, mate.
Oh, you make it a large. Make sure it's upsized, thanks, mate. And even the umpire started cracking up. So it was hilarious. But but that's fun. That's when sledges were good, and it was good fun. But look, the thing is, I've always been involved with a little bit of sledging. I mean, it's not something I'd never instigated, but it was something I've always stood up for myself.
Yeah.
Because it happened, when I was at school. It happened in the juniors, and it happened right throughout my grade career. I remember my first game in first grade. Oh my God, I was barreled up against the wall against another player, outside Coogee Oval, and basically told that, I should be in a restaurant with a wok, not with a cricket bat in my hand. It was just like, there was some brutal times. But and it happened once or twice too in the first class arena, which I look back and I think it's extremely disappointing. Particularly now when we look at how everyone has been so accepting of multiculturalism in all sports, and because I was such a minority and a novelty, that because of the way I looked, I was being ridiculed. And but I don't look. It's weird. I don't look back on it negatively, particularly at school. I mean, I think every day at school, in junior school and primary school and high school, I was racially sledged at some stage. But it was part of the culture, it was part of growing up, and it sort of made me the person I am today. And also, once again, I've got an older brother who went through the same sort of stuff as well, and had the same experiences. But we were lucky that we surrounded ourselves with good friends and good people that we just knew that had our back. There was some classic sledges. But I'll tell you one funny one over in England that really got me, because I was playing in the Liverpool competition, and they said, just be careful of a guy called Jerry Byron when we're playing Formby Cricket Club. He said he really, really hates Australians. I said, okay, cool. He might not know that I'm Australian. That's cool, so I won't say anything. And he was the opening bowler, and it was a blue sky day, and it was a beautiful day, and at one end of the wicket, it was wet, and he just happened to be bowling from the other end, so he was bowling into the wet patch. And apparently, he'd been doing that for the last 40 years. The whole wicket's dry except this one wet patch. And his son must have been the curator or something.
Yeah.
But he always bowled from one end, and he was 55 years old. He came off 3.5 steps, and he bowled in duckers and out duckers at about 115 miles an hour. 115 k's an hour.
Yeah.
Little dibbly dobblies. No pace on the ball, late swing. And I said, don't do anything, just bat normally. Don't upset him, don't say anything, don't glare at him, don't do anything. Okay, cool. And I patted him away for 2.5 overs. I thought, I just can't keep doing this. So I ran down the wicket, tried to hit him over mid-off, and I managed to get an inside edge past the leg stump down the fine leg for one. And because I was a quarter of the way pitched down, I decided to walk the rest of the way. And my brother ran down, he was on the striker's end. And he put his hands on his hip and he walked past me and he said, fucking Johnny's cut. I said, what'd you say? And he said, fucking Johnny's cut. I said, that's what I thought you said. So off come my gloves. I dropped my bat and I picked him up. I said, listen here, you racist prick. And the umpire come walking around and said, oi, what's going on? I said, you heard what he said. And he said, fucking Chinese cut, so what? So I grabbed the umpire. So now I've got the two of them there, because in Australia we grew up with a French cut.
The French cut.
Right? And I've never heard of the Chinese cut before. Right? The way he was eyeballing me and staring at me. Anyway, everything, calmed down and everything. And the match was a draw. And I remember, I went up to, and my players, my team was saying, what happened? He called me a Chinese something, right? And they went, oh my God. And once it clicked, they tried to explain it to me and they're all pissing themselves off. Well, at the end of the game, we walk in, as tradition is. You go into the clubhouse and you drink. And the opposition get to stay there as long as they want, and the home team put on the drinks. So there was Jerry Byram in the corner, sitting at the bar with a big Hawaiian shirt and a big fat cigar. And he calls me over and says, bro, come over here. So I walk over and you could hear a pin drop. And he says, have a whiskey with me. So we sat down and I thought, yeah, I'll have a whiskey with you. And he gave me a cigar and I'm trying to be cool and smoke the cigar, and inside of my lungs are burning. And I managed to have a half a dozen whiskeys with him. And when it was time to go, I said to him, he was actually a really lovely guy. And I said, Jerry, I got to know, mate, what did you say? And he looked at me, took a puff of his cigar and said, you'll never fucking know. And that was it. So, to this day, I still don't know what he actually said.
Oh.
But yeah, that let's just say that story got around very quickly in the Liverpool competition. I still think it's folklore today.
Oh.
But yeah, who would have thought in England it's called a Chinese cut, not a French cut?
There you go, learning something new every day. Now, Now, I like the way that people reflect on your career as being a bit of an entertainer. Like when you were batting, it was enjoyable to watch when Richard Chee Quee's batting at the crease for New South Wales. You do some more entertaining post-playing career. You get your mates together and you form a band. What has that band meant for you? Being able to perform with some of your good mates and express yourselves in a different way, but also in a similar way to what you do on the cricket field?
Well, that's a great question. What does the band mean to me? Gosh, it's another thing that's I get emotional about, because I think about the opportunities when we first got together, which was almost like an accident, really. I remember, music was such a big thing in the dressing room, and everyone had their different tastes. And, there was one year that Brad McNamara, Shane Lee and myself were all playing cricket in England, and Brad and Shane were living together, and they were learning guitar and playing guitar, and I didn't mind having a little bit of a strum, but I didn't mind. I love singing. I love harmonising, and so we get together and have play a few tunes and have a bit of a jam, and it was fun. And we came back, and Gavin Robertson, who has been in bands all his life, to be fair, and he's played Test cricket for Australia, and I can tell you now, he's a better musician. And
Wow.
But I say that with the utmost respect, because that's how good of a drummer he is. He's phenomenal, and he's played in bands all his life. So I don't say that lightly. He's so good, and I remember doing something. I think it was a Doug Walters function, and we just did something small, and then we got an opportunity to do. I think it was Greg Matthews' testimonial, and we decided to do the Australian national anthem, and we did it to the tune of 500 Miles, and I think our leader at the time, Kim Beasley, was in the audience, and he gave it the thumbs up. We thought, we might be on something here, and we thought, we don't have a bass player, and that's when Brett Lee decided that when Shane sort of said to me, we don't have a bass player, and he said, I want to be in the band. How can I be in the band? He said, well, we don't have a bass player. And the next day, he went out and bought a bass.
Wow.
And taught himself how to play bass, because Binger loves music. And, he's one of those guys that if you walk into a music shop, when he leaves the music shop, his fingerprints will be on every instrument. He loves it. And, next thing we know, we've got this band, and but we've got nowhere to play. So we just played. I think we did something for the New South Wales cricket function. And then we met a guy called Garth Porter. Now, he was the keyboard player from Sherbet, and he is an absolute cricket tragic, and we are music tragics. He invited us to his studio one day we thought we were just going for a jam and pizza, and he said, when we got there, he says, right, let's get to work. And we were like, work for what? I said, mate, I've invited you guys here because I want to, let's write an album. And we were like, what? And he said, yeah, I'm going to help you to do it. Wow. So the next thing you know, I think within a month, we'd written an album. And we'd put it together, and the next thing we've launched our first album, and a single to the album, and the album came out just before Christmas. And I remember walking into Kmart looking at the new releases, and and there was Sixing Out the CD in Kmart. It was just like, wow. So yeah, it was just, and then we we got to launch the CD. We had an incredible launch. We got to tour all around Australia, and we did a lot of touring around New South Wales, particularly a lot of the more rural regions of New South Wales as well. And I look back and I think, oh my God, what an opportunity! And I look back now, I think we've played close to 300 gigs now, and it's only been recently that we've gotten back together. Because we got an opportunity to play a gig for Albanese, our Prime Minister.
Oh, wow.
Apparently his partner, Jodie, got in contact with Brett because she was a Six and Out fan back in the day, which was magnificent. And said, give Brett a call because you played tennis with him, and one thing led to another. Next thing you know, we've got back together, and it sort of spurred us on to do some more, and we all realised just how much we miss it because it's very hard to get us all together because of our time constraints.
Yeah.
So, now, we followed the cricket around towards the end of last year. We toured Adelaide, and we played in Sydney, and we also toured over to Melbourne as well. And it was incredible. It was incredible because the people came and they remembered and they were singing our songs, and it was honestly, it blew us away. It blew us all away, and it made us realise, man, this is fun. This is unique. We are unique, and let's do it. Let's continue to do it while people come and while people have fun. And humbly speaking, I think we put on a good show.
And a similar adrenaline rush for you, like belting out tunes on stage, scoring Mercantile Mutual Cup hundreds. What are the parallels from a personal point of view?
Much more comfortable against the red ball than being in front of the microphone, I can honestly say. Look, it's the old saying, like a lot of rock stars want to be sportsmen and a lot of sportsmen want to be rock stars.
Yeah.
Look, we got an opportunity. I'll be honest with you, I get so nervous before every gig. The boys know it as well. Mm. But then once we're into it, just something happens. It's just, you just go to a different place, and it's just, you just have fun. And every gig is different because, my job is to try and get people up dancing. Yeah. I would probably call myself more of a frontman than a lead singer. I don't have the greatest voice, but I can hold a note and I can get people up dancing, and we have fun. And the thing is with us is we know when we make a mistake and we mess up and we laugh at ourselves, right? And that way the audience, but we do realise that, after 2.5 songs, the novelty of us being cricketers wears off, and you actually have to perform. You actually have to do it. So we spent hours and hours and hours and days on end being in the, rehearsing and in the studios jamming. There was one time that we were there for like 6 hours, and then we realised we didn't have a break.
Oh, wow.
Like, who does that? That's just unheard of. And we just love it. We just love it. We absolutely love it. So to be able to do it, to get together now, and we've got that bond from when we were playing, and when we first started Six and Out. So we've always had that bond, and now, we're literally about to talk about what we're going to do at the end of this year too. So yeah, watch this space. There could be there's going to be some more gigs later in the year, hopefully.
Can't wait.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. I think I'll be trying to get myself up to Sydney at the right time to see that for myself. I was certainly one of those people that owned the CD back in, it must have been 2000. Was it 2000 that it came out originally?
It was, yeah. It was. Yeah, so we did the we did a single to launch the album. So that single was a CD.
Yep.
Then the album was a CD. Then we did an EP, which is another CD. Then in total we did about 5. I think we did about 5 CDs, including we wrote the song for the New South Wales cricket team called "We're the Blues." I don't think they adopted it as their swimming song. But at one stage, I remember, that was in every gift bag from New South Wales cricket. There was a CD of "We're the Blues." But it was funny. And we look back, as I said, when we make a mistake, we're the first ones to laugh at ourselves. And when the punters know, like if you're expecting an excess of powder finger, don't come.
Yeah.
But if your bar's pretty low, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised.
And you get a few people up on stage. Did you get some of the commentators on stage in that tour?
We did, yeah, we did, and because Brett was part of the commentary team, they were all fantastic.
Yeah.
Look, the meeting them was just a highlight for me too. I mean, I remember at the MCG, Brett took us up to the inner sanctum where the commentators were, and got to meet some of the guys I actually knew. But then you walk through the room and you see the likes of, Ian Botham and Wasim Akram and Ishigua. I mean, I got to say, she is so delightful. I met her and her husband, and he's a muso himself.
That's right, yeah.
And honestly, they're the most beautiful people. And when they got an opportunity for them to come up, there's no ego. They just said, "Yeah, let's have some fun." And then she got up, and she was such a good sport.
Yeah.
We got it. And we did manage to get a couple of them up, and one of them made their debut. That was his first time on stage with us. So it was so much fun. It was so much fun, and they all came, and even the Australian cricket team came in Adelaide, because ironically the gig was booked on day 3, and they managed to finish the game on day 3, so they came that night. So yeah, everything sort of fell into place. So we're really, really keen to do it all again, and each venue that we played at would love us to come back, and so that means a lot to us as well.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, you've been so generous with your time, Richard. I really, really do appreciate it, and I know our listeners will as well. But before we let you go, our final question, you've had a bit of time to think about it, not heaps of time. We like to ask people to come up with a dream net session. So you get to invite anyone you like to the cricket nets. Who are you inviting, and why would you like them to be there? Your top 3.
My top 3 cricketers or anybody?
Could be anybody.
To have a net session.
Yeah, or to be at the nets with you. Yeah.
First one's easy. It'll be Shane Warne. Shane Warne. I was lucky enough to play a couple of times against Warney when he was playing back in the day, and just for the opportunity to play against his guy, and of course we're playing against them at their peak, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, one player that I was lucky enough to play against some amazing bowlers in my time when I played, and I look back and I think, gosh, I played against Murph Hughes, I played against the West Indies, I played against Malcolm Marshall and Ambrose and Walsh, I played against Shoaib Akhtar and Alan Donald and some of these guys, and I think, my gosh, but there was one player that I would love to have had a battle against. And I know that he would have made me look silly, but still, just to know that I played against him, had the opportunity to test myself, Wasim Akram.
Oh.
It would just have been, the guile of Warney, and then the late swing and the devastation of the beautiful seam of, Wasim Akram would have been something that I would just love to have done.
Mm. And
the third player is easy. I would bring my brother.
Oh, yes.
Just so he could play. He could be with me, and we could both get that opportunity to play against those guys. Because that would just be like a bucket list thing for me, and Michael as well. So yeah, my brother.
Oh, how good! How good! Some great selections, Cheeks, and. Thank you so much. I really, really have thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you. Thank you for being so transparent and digging deep for us and sharing some great stories. We really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure, Matt. And congratulations with the podcast, mate. I wish you all the very best, mate.
A massive thanks to Richard Chee Quee for joining us on this edition of the Cricket Library podcast, and very much appreciative of you, our loyal listeners as well, that tune in to each and every episode. And a big welcome, of course, to all of our new listeners. If you are a new listener, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you check out the back catalogue. Plenty of great stories have been told on this platform over the years, and we look forward to bringing you more great stories as the weeks and months continue. Make sure you keep your eye out for when Six and Out are performing across the summer. That will be well worth getting along to. A great night to be had for one and all. Well, this has been Matt Ellis for the Cricket Library podcast. Bye for now.